Welcome everyone to part 1 of the Tamiya Super Avante online build. Before we get to the build, we're going to go over a few tools we suggest to build this car, so let's get at it. First of all, you're going to need a 1.5mm hex driver, a 2.0mm hex driver, a 5.5mm nut driver, a 7.0mm nut driver, a silver Sharpie, optional, a hobby knife with a sharp blade, a set of calipers, and some turnbuckle building tools. In addition, you're also going to need a pair of regular pliers, needle nose pliers, scissors, shock pliers, a shock building stand, a power driver, optional, shock fluid, CA glue, and some work towels for cleaning up any messes. Okay, let's get this buggy started. Open bag A and get all the parts sorted. We did this during the unboxing video, so yeah, it's mostly done. The kit comes with a foam sheet on the left and a foam pad on the right. Make sure to use the correct foam where applicable. The foam sheet is used in several places in the build to help keep dirt out of the drivetrain. You can measure it out per the instructions or freehand it like I'm doing. To prevent it from being slightly twisted, make sure you press the aluminum motor mount completely into place before screwing it in. There are two length cross pins included, an 8mm and a 9.8mm. Make sure you don't mix these up during this part of the build. There are quite a few different ball bearing sizes used in the rear gearbox, so pay close attention to the ones you are using. The Super Avante uses a Tamiya pitch spur gear, meaning you need Tamiya pinions for a correct gear mesh. Since I have way more 48 pitch gears, I swapped out the stock spur gear for 48 pitch 78 tooth gear. Because the mounting holes in my 48 pitch spur gear differ from the stock Tamiya gear, you may only need to use 2 of the 4 M3x6mm screws to hold it in place. Trim off a few more pieces of foam sheet and mount them to the spur gear cover. While not completely necessary, it is suggested that you apply a small amount of the moly grease onto all of the internal gears. If you added the moly grease, you can rotate the gear train to help spread it around. Inserting the upper cover can be tricky, especially if you didn't seat the aluminum motor mount correctly. If everything is correct, it should slip right into the mount and drop into place. Once all the screws are in place, you can check the drivetrain. Oh my, how buttery smooth. This hole looks to be the location for a future slipper clutch option, but for now, Tamiya has us gluing this little cap in its place. The Super Avante comes with two sets of rear wing mounts. We'll be using the shorter ones per the manual, however we'll be keeping the taller ones handy in case we need more rear wing. And your Super Avante rear gearbox is complete. Part of our electronic system includes an R1 Wurks 17.5 turn brushless motor. I use R1 products in almost every race vehicle I have and truly love how powerful these motors are. Before finalizing your motor position, I would suggest test fitting it to see where the motor wires are going to go. In my case, there wasn't enough room, so I had to make a slight modification to the lower chassis plate in order to get them to fit. Once you're happy with your motor placement, set the gear mesh and tighten up both motor screws. When installing the turnbuckles, make sure the knurled part of the shaft is towards the left side of the car. This makes tuning adjustments consistent for the entire car. Everyone has a different way to build a ball diff. This is the easiest way that I've found to do it. Feel free to follow along or come up with your own method. When applying the grease, make sure you pack some in every hole. Don't be afraid to overdo it just a little. It's better to have more than not enough. Compress the diff spring a couple times before installation. Don't be afraid to use the black grease. More is good here and allows you to easily pick up the thrust balls. Assembling the diff is a little tricky, but I found if I held the screw in place with one of the provided L wrenches, I could drop the spring and T-nut in place and just start tightening. A trick to test the diff setting is to hold it in between some scissors and turn the gear. You want the diff tight enough so that the gear just barely turns with a good amount of force. To help prevent these red bushings from falling out, I used a little bit of black grease to hold them together. Because the red bushings basically hide the diff adjustment screw, I marked the outdrive where the diff adjustment screw was. This should make adjustments much easier now that I know which side the screw is on. Attaching this foam sheet is a little tricky. There is no easy way to do it, just do your best here. Alright, almost done with the rear of the Super Avante. Hang in there, just a few more steps. Keeping all the parts together during this assembly step might be a little tricky. If all else fails, try using some black grease on the shims and suspension pivot balls. At this point, make sure both suspension arms swing freely without any binding. Make sure you install the set screw into the rear hubs before the 5mm ball stud. The rear hubs are not directional, which means you can use them on either side of the car. After final assembly, the rear suspension arms seem bound up when moving up and down. I found that if I cut these red bushings in half, it eliminated that bind. Apply a small amount of anti-wear grease to the dog bone pins to help reduce wear when out having a good time with your Super Avante. And that concludes part 1 of our Tamiya Super Avante online build. This was a little more lengthy than our normal builds, but there really is a lot going on here that we just couldn't leave out. Sure is turning out to be a great looking car though. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, it really helps the channel out. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of future videos in the series. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you in the next video.